Freedom Guy 55 here again, and the movie is Halloween. It stars Donald Pleasence and Jamie Lee Curtis, and it is directed by John Carpenter. Yes, I am going to talk about it. And it's about a mental patient that escapes from an asylum, and he winds up actually going back to the neighborhood where he wound up killing his sister when he was, I think, around 8. And then he starts terrorizing the babysitters there by killing them off one by one. You know, so it's a typical particular kind of Hollywood formula. The problem is that it was done in 1978. This was pretty much the first kind of blueprint, I would say, for the modern day horror film. I mean, this is the father of the modern day horror film. Every single horror film that came after it was basically mimicking off of this. So it's pretty much responsible for Friday the 13th and on. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, no, that was Black Christmas. Well, Black Christmas was the influence to Halloween, sure. But this was the one that actually hit the right note, that actually spawned the rest of them. Kind of like the jock that fucked the prom queen and had a bunch of kids with her. If that makes any sense to you. And I really do love this movie. This movie is actually awesome. But it's really so out of date because it's been repeated so many times in so many other different movies. But if you, to my perspective, if you really need to, in some ways, to need to appreciate this film, you're going to have to buy kind of like DVDs like this, with like a whole bunch of like special features and whatnot. Because that is really how I think you can really appreciate this particular kind of movie. And if you have any extra money, really, I think that, you know, because of the recession or whatever, I think you should buy the kind of documentary. This is kind of like a documentary of the whole entire making of the film. And it also has a lot of special features and such like that in it. And I think that that would actually help you kind of appreciate this film so that you don't think that, oh, it's just a typical, you know, horror movie and whatnot. Because if you really do like film, this is a really good movie. And being directed by John Carpenter, when I talk about Attack the Block in my review of it, when I say that something going for broke, I'm talking about, when I talk about John Carpenter and him going for broke, that's what I'm saying. This is what I'm talking about. Certain films that he's done, like this, and others that he's done in the 80s and in kind of the late 70s. Because they're actually really done on such a small budget. I mean, Halloween was done for like $300 and some odd thousand, and then it winds up actually making pretty much $1 million in the box office. Now that was pretty big change for 1978. And the interesting thing I find about this movie is that this movie would have never worked if they didn't get Mike Myers right. Because Mike Myers was scripted as being the Shape, right? And there, you know, how would you actually do a Shape in a movie? You know, how would you do that? Well, the one thing is that I think the interesting part about it was the fact that they wound up actually doing something really simple, which is just taking a kind of like dark blue kind of onesie electrician suit or something like that, and then spray painting a William Shatner mask white and cutting out the eye holes. Now, it didn't look like a William Shatner mask, but it basically really had a tendency to cover the whole person's face, and it just looked like a kind of nondescript face. Well, and I think that that's what made it effective and made it look like a shape of a person, because it covered his whole entire body. So you didn't know who that guy was. And that's what it really worked. And I thought that it was really cheating when you wind up seeing his face at the end of the movie. And by the way, there are going to be spoilers here, but I think that pretty much practically anybody who winds up seeing this video probably saw this movie. Anyway, the interesting thing also is the fact of how they used Michael Myers within certain camera shots. They kind of used Michael Myers kind of like almost like that, you know, like when you have that kind of like flash at the corner of your eye and you wind up going, what was that? You know, that kind of thing. Well, they wound up kind of filming him kind of like that, where, you know, he'd be kind of like there's one shot where Jamie Lee Curtis is in the foreground and, you know, Mike Myers is lying in the background. She thinks that she's defeated him. And then all of a sudden you're focused on her. And then up comes Michael Myers at the corner of your eye and you wind up seeing it. Or there's this one shot earlier in the film where we wind up seeing the babysitters in the background. And then we wind up seeing Michael Myers come into frame on the side. You know, the side of him come into frame and you see this, like, you know, shape, right? That's actually pretty cool. And I also think it's kind of interesting because I think they used another kind of image where Jamie Lee Curtis is in a school and she winds up looking off to the side and seeing Michael Myers, then looking back and then seeing it again, which is usually repeated in many other horror movies. But the thing is, that was new for that time. But it's playing that kind of concept of that corner of the eye looking and seeing something. And also, what's so interesting about the film is the different particular images, because it doesn't play off blood. I mean, this is not a bloody horror movie. But what it is that it just kind of plays this kind of creepy vibe, because you don't really see Michael Myers. You don't really know exactly who he is. You know that he's an escaped mental patient, but that's pretty much it. You just don't see his face. You don't know what he looks like, all that kind of stuff. And the one thing that's interesting and creepy about it is those scenes where he winds up killing other individuals. Like when he comes out of the closet, and he winds up pinning the guy up against the wall, and then he winds up staying there and just tilting his head, seeing his masterpiece or something. Or when he kind of puts the woman he strangled on display with his sister's tombstone at the, above her head in the bed. Those creepy shots is just almost as if he's trying to create some sort of particular kind of piece of artwork, like we see with like kind of serial killers and shit. You know, I mean, it's like really kind of scary, kind of spooky, I would say. Not kind of scary now, but kind of spooky. But anyway, it was really scary for people at the time. And I think that what's so interesting also in this movie, especially behind the scenes, when you wind up actually finding out how he came up with the musical note or the musical score. You know, the score that goes. I mean, the one thing is that it's like playing. It's a thing called 4/5 time, but you play it with bongos. Bump, 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 I think it's 4/5 time or 5/4 time, one or the other. Anyway, you play it with like bongos, bump, 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 right? And the one thing that's actually so interesting is that he just took that and then he applied it to a piano. So it went, and just that simple type of change is just what made this kind of score just legend and just identified as being Michael Myers right there. It's just amazing how that element just went into, each other. It's just amazing. And I also love those kind of, at the end of the movie where he winds up actually getting shot. Michael Myers gets shot and he falls off the roof, falls off the balcony and whatnot. And then you think he's dead, but then you wind up actually going back and you find out that he's gotten up and left again. I mean, it's typical in horror movies, but this was actually different for the time. You got to remember. And the thing is that it was always just to try to actually say, because it was stated that Michael Myers is this kind of relentless force. He's this force of evil that really just never dies. He just keeps on taking a beating, but he just never dies. He just keeps on coming back. And it kind of is this kind of personification of evil. That evil just keeps on coming back and, moving on. And and I find that kind of interesting. Also, the fact that he winds up mentioning that, where he winds up actually shooting different shots where people have been, empty kind of shots where people have been. And he winds up stating that he's shooting these shots of where Mike Myers used to be, because it's showing that evil always is around. And I found that kind of actually interesting. Just a little tidbit. There's other stuff that's actually part of the documentary and going behind the scenes that is just so fascinating that you just must see in these kind of films, in the documentaries. And there are things that I even probably missed that I would probably see again, and I'd be like, oh, that, okay, and understand those things. And it'd be interesting to just see it. But I just think that, what would I give this film? Well, I give this film 4.5 stars. I really do love this movie. This movie works extremely well. I recommend it to a lot of people, especially individuals who are going into film and trying to make a movie and wanting to understand, that you don't really need a lot to make a really good piece of entertainment. Well, anyway, and I guess that's it. And I thank you for your time, man. Have a nice day.